Three overlooked growth strategies for your church this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. All right. Growth is one of these words that inevitably I'm hearing the typing already in the comments. God grows the church. We know this. Okay. We know. You don't have to tell us. You don't need to put that comment in there. Just stop yourself. You know what?
A little angry this morning, Scott? A little right off the bat.
I guess I get a little annoyed with that. I'm going, okay, that's a little bit like telling a farmer, God grows plants. It's like, yeah, yes, he sure does. But farmers put seeds in the ground, they water the plant, to suggest that there is no human interaction between, our effort and what God does. It's really, really bad theology. At the same time, you can't manufacture something, just like a farmer can't command the plants to grow. You cannot command or manipulate your church to grow in order for it to be healthy.
Farmers strategize for growth.
They strategize for growth and optimize.
They also want healthy plants.
They do.
Healthy plants, Scott.
That's right. That's right. So can we just, if you got triggered by the word growth and you thought, I have to say something about how God is responsible for growth, we got it. I got it. But we're focusing today on some things that you can do, that the Lord is inviting you into, some strategies that you can employ that God doesn't need your help, but he's inviting you to participate in the process. So here are some strategies, some things you can do to get better at reaching more people and spreading the gospel. So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, there we go. Specifically in the mid-sized church range, these are super attainable. If your church, I don't know, either by specific numbers or just your thought that like, oh, I'm not mid-size, I'm small. These are not out of reach for you either. And these are things that larger churches probably are already doing. They probably,
I don't know, not all of them.
No, not all of them. Of course, not all of them. But these things are, I think when you're in the mid-sized church range, you start maybe looking at these things because you're like, hey, we've got something going on here and we want to begin some optimization and trying to keep this thing heading in a good trend line direction. So I don't think any of this would be, no matter what size your church is, you don't want to turn this off. This will work. No. This is good stuff. Yep. Great stuff.
All right.
Amazing stuff.
That's good. Okay. So let's talk about mastering the church welcome strategy. Mastering your church welcome strategy. This is so important. And this might not be revolutionary or new to you, but I'm wondering if you're doing this well and if you've really mastered it. There's a difference between trying some things out and having some inconsistency there and really mastering a church welcome strategy. So you really got to get this in place because it's so easy for people to show up and just have that failure to connect, that failure to really get integrated early on. So we have some specific tips that we want to give you that will help you master your church welcome strategy. The first one is this. You need to really create and develop a welcome team that specializes in this. So what a common thing that I see in churches that we work with, AJ, is that people will have people who just pitch in. They really serve somewhere else, and then they kind of on the side help with the welcome team. And I think that that's maybe okay to some degree to have, you're going to need X number of greeters or ushers or whatever, and to have some people who are also serving in other areas also be a greeter. But for you to have a core team of 3 or 4 or 5 people who are that welcome team. They're leaders in the welcome team and they specialize in that. And they can really help you with the things beyond Sunday morning in the follow up and so on, which we're going to talk more about. Having that team that this is their passion. Our passion is to help connect new people into the life of our church. I think that's kind of the first step within this strategy of mastering your church welcome strategy is actually having a team who owns this responsibility.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think even I don't know. I think there's something about just knowing you're a part of a team with a specific purpose. I there's a church that I've been in communication with that where they were only utilizing deacons in welcoming on Sundays, which ended, I think they came to the realization it was kind of an underutilization of deacons, which have also other responsibilities. And they just implemented more of a broad welcome team. They put it out like, you know what? We want more people engaged in welcoming on Sundays. And I just saw some kids they had kids like handing out bulletins and stuff
Mhm.
the other day on a recent Sunday. And I thought, well, that's really cool. They opened it up. You don't have to be a deacon to be able to participate in welcoming. So because they wanted more people engaged in the team, and they really were trying to create it as more of a welcome team, like you're just saying. And they got kids involved too. And because they opened it up and they said, hey, you know what? We want friendly people that are excited about welcoming on Sunday. So I think that was a great move, and it freed up the deacons for things that they wanted them engaged in that would require maybe a higher level of spiritual maturity and other uses.
Yeah. I think another aspect of mastering your welcome strategy, you got to get the team right, and then you have to get the guest follow up right. I think a lot of
Yeah.
you would say, "Hey, we're friendly." When people show up, um, I, I I was actually just at a church this past weekend, and I was the guest speaker, and but not everyone when I walked in the building. I don't know that everyone knew that, so they're still kind of looking at you like, "Are you new? Do I need to hand you a bulletin or what?" And you got to train up that team to make sure that that welcome experience is really good, that they're not just friendly, but they know how to when they're not sure if someone's new or not, how do I handle that reaction? Because if their face is, I'm not sure if this is someone new or if this is someone who's been here before, man, is that obvious. And so knowing how to handle those situations. So definitely having a team and training them well is the first thing, but having a follow-up plan is equally important. It's
Yeah.
so important. And I think there's a temptation now. We've talked about this before, AJ, but I think that we don't utilize, some churches tend to go to one extreme or another. They go all in on something that's automated. They've subscribed to, pastor's line or text in church, or they have something set up in planning center or some other system that's automatically sending some emails or texts and so on. Or it's all analog. It's all just done by hand. The pastor or the secretary sends a letter, the week following a visit. But you really need a balance between these two things. You need
Hmm.
some things that are automated and quick, and you need some things which are done by hand, done by a human being, a phone call, a handwritten postcard. So blending that, if it's all automated, people know that. They're used to going to a store or a restaurant or some business, and I get a text or I get an email, and I know it didn't come from a person. Um, you might appreciate that they acknowledged that you exist. That's good. But to follow that then up with the handwritten postcard
Hmm.
that couldn't be, you know, done in an automatic way, that shows up a level of care and a level of touch. So there's the beauty of the automated things, AJ, is that you can rely on it happening on a consistent schedule. At
Yeah.
this interval, this touch point is happening. But the warmth that comes from something that only a human can do
Hmm.
shows that you actually care about them as a person and not just as a number, that's just gotten in some sort of an automated sequence.
Yeah. I also think in most cases, it's what they think is a process or a plan. It's too short, and
Mm,
stops too quickly. So I think a little bit longer range
yes.
on making connection points is better. And definitely, if your guest follow up quote unquote plan right now is, yeah, the week after they get a postcard, and maybe it's even personalized from the pastor, and that's it, you definitely are not doing enough. And it's going to take more points of contact over a longer period of time. Because I mean, really, what does that end up saying? If we once, maybe twice, we reach out and then we're like, no, at that point, we really are saying we didn't really necessarily care too much about making a connection with you. We're not willing to try very hard. If you didn't come back the following Sunday or 2 Sundays later, whatever, we're
Yeah.
moving on to somebody else.
Well,
So
and
I
that's a
think
good point, AJ. What does success look like? Have we defined what does a successful welcome strategy look like? Is it that they came back a second time? Is it that they attended a newcomer event? Is it that they
mhm.
signed up for a growth track or a membership class? Is it that they joined a small group? All of those could be uh, measures of success, but you need to decide this is what our measure of success is, and then actually be guiding people towards that so you can measure on your own how successful is our welcome strategy. So mastering your church welcome strategy requires that you define what mastering it would require. Like what does success look like?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I think that is an exercise that the leadership team of every church should engage in. Like, well, yeah, what does success look like? How are we going to engage with people? What are we inviting them to next? I always tell every church I work with, your guest follow-up plan should always be inviting them to something, and that something should not be, hey, come back to church on Sunday. It's got to be something other than that we're always inviting guests to. And I think that's going to be more compelling. And again, before you start screaming, at the speakers that you're listening to this on, yes, church is compelling, but we're inviting them into as a relationship.
Mhm.
And especially if they're non-believers or new believers or just immature followers of Jesus, we need to build a relationship with them first to be able to help them build a relationship with Christ. And so, I think sometimes we maybe get a little haughty, even like, no, look, we got the best thing going is Jesus. You just need to come to church. And that's just not going to work for everybody. And maybe even for most people. We want to build a relationship with them first. And so we want to invite them to something to do that. And then be able to make that handoff. Like, have you met my friend Jesus though? We're friends now. Have you met my buddy Jesus? So yeah, let's take this one step at a time and
Yeah.
draw them in.
All right. Our second strategy that we want to talk about in helping you to grow that's underutilized, I believe, is we need to implement a serve to grow leadership development strategy. A serve to grow leadership development strategy. What does this mean? What does serve to grow mean? I think that sometimes in our churches, we distinguish between discipleship and leadership, or between serving and growing. And even as we're building a discipleship pathway, oftentimes we will have maybe something called grow and something called serve, as distinct steps or distinct choices that we might make in the discipleship pathway process. In that growth step, we might say we want you to join a group, and in that serve step, we might say we want you to, join a team. And I think that's okay. But pulling back to a broader theology of of a discipleship pathway, we would say that both of those steps, a serve step and a grow step, are part of a broader process of edification or Christian growth and maturity. These are two things that we do. And so, what if you really want to scale up your church and grow your church, we need to start utilizing our leadership or our volunteering opportunities, our leadership development opportunities as discipleship opportunities. Because the more that someone volunteers, the more that they serve, the more that they're discipled, the better they become a disciple maker themselves, the better they become at inviting people to church, sharing their faith with their friends and neighbors and their family. And so we need to not divorce leadership and discipleship. We need to marry the two together.
Mm.
So we've talked about this extensively in our leadership pipeline training. We did a whole series on leadership pipeline. If you'd like to take the time to read those articles and watch those videos, you can do that. But just briefly here, you really want to build a leadership pipeline strategy, build a leadership pipeline strategy that includes mentorship, coaching, discipleship integrated into this serving and volunteering opportunity. So don't see these as two separate things, but as an integrated whole. Because when we maximize that strategy, it leads to growth in our church, not just spiritual growth, which is obviously significant, but numerical growth as well.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back over the last 20 years of my life developing as a disciple, I think some of the greatest and most fruitful periods was when I was, had the opportunity to engage in areas that were most closely aligned with my personal gifting. I was providing something that the church needed, and I was getting exponentially more out of it myself in personal growth. And so I think this is really good. Scott, we've been putting together some information for some fundraising development and everything recently. And so I've been, which you can do at malfersgroup.com/donate. Um, but I've been just going back through information from a lot of the churches that we've worked with and going through pictures, for looking for information. And I think I only had one church in the last couple of years that made in their discipleship pathway service the next step, like the first part of their growth area in the
Mm.
church, as opposed to joining a group. So I'm curious if just anecdotally off the top of your head, if you can think of others that have done that on the churches that you've worked with. Is that more, have you found that to be more common than I have? But
Yeah.
I think that's an overlooked option. And I do always present it as an option for churches, but have you found that more often than I have?
No. Yeah, I'm with you in that I kind of encourage churches to think about this that it is an easier ask to ask someone to volunteer than it is to ask somebody um, to go to a stranger's house for a small group meeting. Um, but people don't take me up on that very often because they see that no, we want to move people from the big room to the small room, but really you want to move people from the big room into action.
Mm,
Uh, and when you begin to see those volunteer opportunities as discipleship opportunities, then I guess another way to think about that too, AJ, is you not only does it provide an atmosphere where a person can be discipled, it also provides an opportunity for someone to be a discipler,
yeah,
right? So all of those people who are running teams now, maybe they didn't before have an opportunity to build into somebody because they didn't know where to do that. They were attending a small group, but they weren't the small group leader. So if you weren't the small group leader, you felt like, I don't even know who I should be discipling. you know Now if they're someone who is running a team, they're a coach or they're a coordinator on a team. Now they've got their people, they've got their 6 7 8 people that they're building into, that they're developing, not only as a volunteer but as a disciple. So it
yeah.
creates discipleship opportunities for you to be built up, but also for you to invest in others. Imagine, I think it's just one of the biggest wasted opportunities, AJ. Think about how many people volunteer in a church. On average, it's like 40%. I know we like to say 80-20 rule, but that's not true. Most churches, it's about 40% of their people are volunteering, but they just show up. They come and they do their thing and they leave. No one's building into them.
Yeah.
Not really. And what a missed opportunity. And if you're not seeing that as a growth strategy, you're missing something because
Hmm.
you have to remember that the number one way that churches grow is through personal invitation. And the people who are
Hmm.
most likely to be inviters are those who are mature in their faith.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a huge missed opportunity because I think people that truly that get engaged and feel because based on the way they're treated, feel like they truly are contributing to something important and meaningful. I think there's such a mindset shift from the consumerism to the leadership and participation mind, that it's just a huge improvement in, I think, personally and in the way you relate to others in the church and outside the church. And so I think if the more we can get people employed in meaningful service in the church and make sure that they feel important because they
Hmm.
are, I just think that that's a big missed opportunity. That it just changes people's attitudes, it changes their perspective, and when you feel like I really am needed here, God has a place for me here, and what I'm doing is important, regardless of what it is. I think you want to. I think it just changes your whole countenance. Even, I mean, and it makes you want to talk about it with people, and that's just a. I think it's a big deal. I think this is a huge missed opportunity.
Yep. You share what you care about, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
you can cultivate that caring about it
Mhm.
through that development.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Number three, optimizing our weekday church engagement. Another big opportunity for churches here. And we're talking about this building. Now, some of you, maybe you don't have a building, or you're leasing and you don't have a lot of options for utilizing it. So it goes, we're more so speaking to those that do have some type of permanent space and you have access to it to utilize. Um, Boy, is there a lot of square footage out there, sitting dark and quiet, for most of the week, and there you can leverage that for something better. So now,
Mhm.
certainly, programmed engagement times is great, and some churches are utilizing that. Maybe we could even say many or most are. You've got something going on midweek, perhaps. Now, we would encourage you to evaluate that. Is it really working, or are we just doing it out of tradition? Because there's a lot there's a lot of you out there with the midweek prayer service, the midweek meeting, midweek, whatever it might be, that, let's be honest, nobody's showing up for it. And literally, we talk to you, and it's 5 people, it's 3 people, it's 12 people, and you've been doing it for decades. And I would say let's let's take another look at this. Is there a better use of that 90 minutes? So there's that. There's programmed discipleship activities that could be happening, that I think you should better optimize. But other things that could be happening maybe during the day, weekday times, which isn't available for everybody, but it is available for a lot of people, and probably more people today than there was, 5 years ago, because the pandemic changed a lot of people's workdays. And just the nature of technology, the internet availability, and things like that. People are working remotely. People have flex time, and people that just work alternate times, that they could be coming up to church and utilizing that space, being in that space. Um, and Scott, the idea of third space, either
Mhm.
for work. I don't know, maybe that's kind of incongruent there, because there are workplaces, but having a non-office space to do some work or just meet with people,
Yeah.
um, is a big opportunity, I think, for churches. And you could do it on the cheap, and be able to provide something that a lot of people might have an interest in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've actually done a previous episode on third spaces, and we maybe we'll do another one here in the future. But the idea of churches getting creative on how to use their building Monday through Friday. So yeah, you may have Awana or some other midweek opportunity going on. Certainly with youth and kids, you might, or the space is getting used for Bible studies on a random Tuesday morning, or a random or a Thursday evening, or something like that. So we know that we're not talking about those things, and we're not telling you to stop doing those things. We're talking about all of the other times that your building is sitting empty, and there are opportunities for you to connect with your community and to connect with existing church members in other times of the week. So creating that, maybe you've got, we've worked with a lot of churches that have a lot of adult Sunday school rooms that aren't being used
Hmm.
anymore. Or maybe they're being used on Sundays, or maybe half of them are being used on Sundays, but the rest of them aren't being used at all anymore. And the children's ministry doesn't need them because the children's ministry isn't that big. So what do you do with them? They just sit empty, and they stink because they're they're just kind of shut up and growing mold at this point. What if you transform some of these spaces into, like you've been talking about, AJ? What if you transformed some of these spaces into co-working space? Invest in some inexpensive desks, upgrade your internet. That'd be a key factor for that being useful for someone. But if
Yep.
you thought of that as an outreach investment to have high quality, high speed internet, and have some coffee, maybe it's for a donation only, but you make it available for free, and people could have come have a place to come and work. Co-working spaces are expensive. To
Mhm.
offer that as a service for free to your community, to people who are wanting to start a business, or they're self-employed, or they're looking for a place to host a meeting because maybe they work from home, but they need a place to be able to have meetings. They don't want to invite people into their home. This is a valuable service that you could be offering, but not just this. Um, Create an alternative worship gathering time. What if you did that? A lot of people work weekends, and so they never get to come to church because they work on weekends. So what if you offered a Wednesday night instead of that Wednesday night prayer meeting that no one hardly goes to? What if you had a abbreviated Wednesday night worship service, and it was the same thing from the previous Sunday, or it's a preview of what's coming up, with a maybe a scaled down set, plus the sermon, but some way to be able to reach people during the week that you can't normally reach because they work weekends. Um, these are all things that you could think about doing to optimize weekday church engagement. Also, AJ doesn't have to be in person, it could be online. What about developing a podcast or a short video series that creates some spiritual encouragement or takes people deeper into the sermon than you were able to go on a Sunday morning?
Yeah. I think that's worth having a little brainstorming session. Get maybe a varied leadership team together. Get some different perspectives. Think about it from a technology point of view. Think about it from a relational point of view. And it's also could open up new spaces to tie a couple of these together that we could engage people in serving as well. That maybe it's not an opportunity right now, but creating something new would open up a volunteer opportunity for somebody that maybe is sitting on the sidelines, and it would just be a great fit for them. So there we go. Three strategies, Scott, and the I think they're kind of all unique to themselves. It's not like we didn't layer on three things that all kind of fit together. So having a great welcome team and a strategy for following up with people, getting people engaged in serving for a greater level of discipleship, and then using your church and your church space and other opportunities to engage people in maybe some alternative ways that you have been just by traditional use and doing what you've always done. So
Yeah.
I think these are good things here, Scott.
You know, these are things that, if we're being honest, uh, larger churches tend to do these things relatively well. Maybe not the last one. There are a lot of large churches that sit empty during the week too.
True. Yeah.
But these, if you're wondering, how do some of these bigger churches, what are they doing that I'm maybe not doing? And maybe there are things about these larger churches you don't like, and that's fine. But some of the things that they're probably doing well is they've mastered that welcome strategy. They know what
Mhm.
they're doing. There's a mix of some digital things, some automated things, and some analog things, some human touch things that they're doing, and they have a team that's focused on it and they're doing it well. They probably are leveraging their leadership development, their leadership pipeline in ways that you're not. So even though they're big, they're actually good at getting small. They are big, but they've know how to distill things into smaller parts and maximize engagement at those smaller levels. So within service teams and within groups. And they are optimizing weekday church engagement. They are finding ways to connect with people, whether it be through digital means or other methods, where they're keeping the church community at the center of someone's life throughout the week, so that church isn't on the margins, but it's in the center. And that's what you really need to be doing if you want to be reaching more people. Life can't be on the margins of people's lives. It needs to be at the center, the central community where they find purpose and where they're engaged. So you can tap into these strategies too, and you can reach more people in your community with the good news about Jesus.
Mhm.
Just as a brief case study as we close, AJ, I worked with a church in Nebraska uh, just last year that when we started, they were a church of 35 people. And today they're a church of 70 people. So they've doubled the number of people that they're reaching each week. And they are beginning to use really right now, they started with strategy number one. Like, we need to get better at welcoming people and reaching out to people and getting them connected into the church. So they just took one of these strategies, and that one strategy has led to them reaching twice the number of people than they were reaching a year ago. They have some other things, obviously, that they were doing too, but in terms of things that have fueled growth quickly, it's that first one. So don't think that these things don't work or that they don't make a difference. They really do.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Hey, little teaser of a teaser. Next week, we're going to announce something new coming up from us, your friends here at the Malford's Group and Healthy Churches Global. So I'm not even saying anything else about that, Scott.
Okay.
You're going to want to find out what is coming up next week. This has been episode 258 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. So if you go to malfordsgroup.com/258, there's this week's show notes, some helpful links over there for you. You can connect with us over there if you have something to say, or if you would like to meet and talk about how we could help your church implement some of these things we talked about today. While you're there, I mentioned it earlier, malfordsgroup.com/donate. There's a button up there in the top right. We need your church partnership to continue to make these resources and tools available to you and to churches around the world. And so we'd love to have that conversation with you about partnership. Thanks for being with us on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We'll see you next time.